Hello and welcome to Long Night at Camp Blood. Today we're going to take a look at 1981's Burial Ground. So we're firmly back in Italian territory here. So this is a film directed by Andrea Bianchi, who a lot of people were already aware of at this point for his 1975 schlocktastic sleaze-fest giallo, Strip Nude for Your Killer. This film actually lends itself to that style. It shares a lot of the same traits as that film, and I would imagine it pleases the same crowd as that film did 6 years prior. But we're talking about another zombie film this time. So I've already discussed Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2. This film is one of the slew of zombie imitation films that came out in Italy in the wake of Zombie 2. Unlike that film, this one, it apes the setup and the narrative style of Night of the Living Dead. So basically what we've got is a cast of characters who are caught up in a zombie uprising, and they barricade themselves, try to fortify a building to fend off the living dead. Speaking of these characters, we've got quite an array of characters who we follow for the duration of this film. There's not much that compares to them, to be honest. So the actors that we've got here, it's a cast of no names, to be honest. I don't even know who the main character is. It's more of an ensemble piece. But, there's only one character really worth mentioning, to be honest, in any detail. But I'll hold off for now. If you've seen this film, you know who I'm talking about. The dubbing actors, actually, you will recognise a lot of voices from this film. We've got all of the big hitters who dubbed the Italian films into English in the 70s and the 80s. You've got the likes of Edward Mannix, Susan Spafford, Carolyn De Fonesca, Pat Stark. They're all here. So, these, you may not recognise the faces. You will recognise their voices. Yeah, the first character we see in this film is a professor who is digging up some Etruscan ruins in the foothills of Rome. I don't know where this guy graduated from, because he's sort of a hobo professor. He looks like he should be living, in a cardboard box in the streets, as opposed to a grand villa in Italy, but who knows. He certainly needs to sort out his hair and his beard. But I guess from what transpires in this film, it's too late for that. You've got some... The main love interest of this film, I guess, for the mother of the cast. There's a mother with a young a young child. What's going on with this guy? He's meant to be the sort of this Lothario character, this, sweeping this woman off her feet, taking her into the thrilling life of, the bourgeois. God, I've never seen pants worn this high in anything recently than this. Like, Jesus Christ. And he's got his top tucked into his pants as well. It's like, I don't know what you're playing at, pal. You kind of need to put more of an effort in when you're trying to woo this woman. I guess it worked, to be fair. I wasn't around in the early 80s, so I don't know if that was a particularly fetching look to woo young ladies, but God. And yeah, I'll stop beating around the bush. Obviously, if you've heard of this film, you know who Peter Bark is. Jesus Christ. So, this is the 10-year-old son of this woman who I've just mentioned. He's the only child at this meet-up in this villa, which is weird because it's three couples who all meet there and proceed to all undress. Some of them dress up in dusty lingerie that she's found in a random wardrobe. But yeah, there's a 10-year-old character who walks in on his mum being pounded by this, bloody nipple height wearing pants Lothario dude. It's weird. But what's really weird about it is the fact that this kid is played by a 25-year-old adult actor. So obviously this guy's a small person, a dwarf, a midget. I'll use every word I can think of because I don't know which is the PC term these days. It changes every other week, it seems. But he's a small guy. He does not look 10. I'll tell you that now. He looks like a shrunken Dario Argento. It's really weird. But he's freaky as hell. This is one freaky, creepy character. There's reasons why they chose to use a 25-year-old small person and not a 10-year-old for this role, which we'll get into later. But God, if it wasn't for him in this film, I don't know if this would be remembered by as many people, because he, never mind the zombies, he is horrifying. He is the stuff of nightmares. So his anglicised name was Peter Bach, but his Italian name, his birth name, is Pietro Barsacchini. And to be fair to the guy, he's still around. I have seen him in interviews recently, and it's not his fault that he looked like a creepy little fucker. But it does, honestly, his presence in this film, Jesus Christ, you can't take your eyes off this guy. The special effects here on the zombies, it was done by Gino De Rossi, who had worked on Fulci's City of the Living Dead the previous year. So that's the one where the zombies kind of they've got the burnt look. It looks like they've got sort of marmalade smeared on their faces. I do really like the way they look, but it's very distinct compared to the other zombies in Fulci's other films. The reason is, the makeup artist was Gianetto De Rossi, who did those makeup effects. So that's Zombie 2, The Beyond, and House by the Cemetery. So you've got these two makeup artists with very similar names, just by coincidence, who both work in the same industry, in the same craft, at the same time, and even work with the same directors. So it's quite confusing, but I guess there's a slight distinction to their work where you can kind of tell who's doing what. To blur the line a little bit more, though, Gino De Rossi on this film had an assistant who was Rosario Prestipino, and this guy actually did work on Zombie 2. He worked on Zombie Holocaust, New York Ripper, Demons 2 with Lamberto Bava. He worked on Opera for Argento, and he also worked later on with Michele Soavi on La Chiesa, the church. So this guy also had quite a long career. So the zombies in this they do look similar to those in Zombie 2, but they're just not as perfected, they're not as neat, which again lends itself a uniqueness to this film, which I quite like. A lot of them are obvious that they're just wearing masks. However, they're quite clearly masks, where that wasn't so much of an issue with Zombie 2. It looks like they spent more time on the makeup for Zombie 2 than they did for this film, but as I say, it doesn't take anything away from it, I don't think. These are very impressive looking zombies, and they're certainly better than anything you see these days, in my opinion. I don't like the look of modern zombies, I just don't. The strange thing about this is, though, these particular dead people, they've risen from an Etruscan tomb, and if you know anything about Italian history, the Etruscans, they were around a long time ago. So I'm guessing these guys have been dead and buried for, 1,000 years? Probably in excess of that. So I'm not sure how they've still got flesh hanging off their bones, but they do. But much like any zombie film, it's not an issue at all. Just try not to think about that aspect, I guess. The behaviour of the zombies is good, though. It's interesting. It's something different. So, as I said, this is plot-wise very similar to Night of the Living Dead. But in this instance, when the zombies discover they can't break the door down, they can't, gain access through the villa's windows, they actually kind of regroup, go off, and they find a bunch of tools. They've got knives, axes, scythes. They even get a battering ram for the main door of the villa. And, eventually they do get in. Some of them even scale the wall. So they're still traditional shambling, flesh-eating zombies. They're very slow, they're very weak, I guess. Don't have any physical strength, but they have the capacity to think and kind of problem solve to gain access to the villa, which I really like. I'm quite protective of zombie rules in films. If a film breaks zombie rules, too much, it really does take me out of the film. But I don't mind this particular aspect, to be honest. So I don't know if that's a problem for any of you guys, but it was fine for me. The location is very, very distinct. I love this location, and I've got a personal link to it, actually. So this was filmed in a town in the foothills of Rome. It's about 20 kilometres, southeast of Rome. It's a town called Frascati, and it's quite an upmarket town in the hills. It's a bit of a touristy town, and there's about 12 or 14 of these big villas. And this one in particular, there's actually 2 Villa Parisis in Frascati, and this is the lesser one. So I've actually been to this location, and to be honest, it looks exactly the same as it did in this film. What I like about this film and the presentation of the villa is when they're in the gardens, when the zombies initially attack, the gardens are quite shabby. They're not well kept. The hedges are slightly grown out. There's tools lying about. There's a bear trap lying on the floor. I know that wasn't there in reality, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But anyway, I love the look of this villa and the grounds. It's gorgeous, this area. And as I say, I can speak from first hand. I actually stayed in the villa just next door to this one, and I could actually look down from our room we stayed in, had a balcony that looked down on this villa, and you could see the grounds, and you could see the fountain that's featured in the film. You can see the hedges next to where the bear trap scene actually happens. I've actually visited the villa as well. The front, the driveway, where the main door where the zombies tried to gain access, I've been down there. So basically, it's a private villa. It's a private residence. But if you contact the place and you have a group of, I think it's 12 or more people who are willing to chip in, 30 or maybe 40 euros each, they do grant you access to the villa, and you can look around, and it's amazing. I would highly recommend any fan of this film who was in the area to stop by. Obviously, you've got to pre-arrange that, but I would recommend doing it. It's a fantastic location. It's been used in a few other films as well. I'm sure most genre fans know this. So it appears in Mario Bianchi's La Bimba di Satani, which I think is known as Satan's Baby Doll. There's Mario Landi's Patrick Still Lives. So that's the unofficial Italian rip-off sequel to Patrick. Rino del Silvestro, his Werewolf Woman, was partially filmed there. That's another notorious schlock Italian film. And I think the link here is the producer of this film, Gabriele Cristani, was involved in those films as well. And I think he had a link to Frascati, clearly, and he must have had a link to the owners of this villa, and that's why so many films were granted access to use it, I believe. So the opening of the film as well, where the hobo professor is digging up the Etruscan tomb, that is filmed in it's not far from the villa. It's a place called Teatro di Toscolo, which is an old amphitheatre in the hills, and it's a really good place to go. It's a local dog walking favourite spot for the locals around there. There's a lot of dog walkers knocking about, so you can actually visit the exact place that you see in the film where the zombies first rise. You can go to the entranceway to the tomb where the hobo professor goes down into. It doesn't actually go anywhere. You can't go inside properly, but you can find it. It's really cool. And I must admit, I did steal a couple of little souvenirs from the location. So I've got a little piece of the stone of the wall into the tomb, and I also took a little souvenir from the villa itself, which I've got in my house here. I've got a piece of the wall. That was a part of the wall of the villa was crumbling away. So I took a small piece of the distinct orange of the stone. So I've got a couple of those souvenirs in the house, which I guess only a strange fanatic like me would do. But there you go. It's a cool keepsake. People who see them in my house don't have any clue what they are, but, I do, and now you guys do too. The finale of the film ends up in a workshop, if you remember. So this is a set. This wasn't a location, and it was in De Paolis Studios in Rome. So at the time, De Paolis was used it was used a lot. It was a lot more prolific than even Cinecittà at the time. So this particular set, it's the workshop that they bar themselves into, and there's the stairs going up one wall and then across into a balcony. It was also used, you should be able to spot that, in Dario Argento's Inferno from the previous year, and it was also used in Luigi Cozzi's Contamination towards the end of that film. There's some incubation units for the alien eggs kept in this room, and you can still see it's the same set, so it's worth looking out for that. That leads us, I guess, to the famous scene, which is why they used a 25-year-old dwarf actor for this role, where the zombified young Peter Bark, he comes back as a zombie, and his mother, for some reason, offers up her naked breast to feed. Forget the fact that this kid is a zombie now. He is 10, and his mother's instinct is to offer up her breast. It's not that weird when you consider earlier in the film he does attempt to suckle on her breast, and also he does try and cop a feel. His little hand wanders very far up her skirt, which is really, really creepy. So yeah, so he's a zombie now. She offers up her breast. He bites off her nipple in gory detail. You don't see that in many films. And obviously, as I said, that's why they had to use an adult actor as opposed to an actual child, because that would be beyond fucked up, and we would not be talking about this film right now because no one would have seen it. It would have been buried for good reason as well. So, I mean, if you're going to look into anything in terms of depth for this film, I don't think you'll find any. The most I can think of, I mean, you could put a spin on it to think, is this an allegory for the working class kind of staging a revolt against the upper class, these bourgeois, upper class people in this villa? The zombies, as I said, use tools and farming tools of industry against them. Is that some kind of political stance on the film? I doubt it. But if you want to look into something a little bit more deep, that may be something you might like to think about when you watch this. It's up to you. But to sum up, it's such a fast-paced film. Honestly, I've been thinking about this. I don't think any zombie film rivals this one for zombie screen time. I mean, this is an hour and a half, or maybe 80 minutes, something like that, running time. And the zombies are on screen for the majority of that. Like, maybe 2 or 3 minutes go by focusing on the characters inside, and then it'll cut back to the zombies. But, God, you get so much zombie presence and zombie screen time in this. You've got zombies being shot, zombies being burned, zombies having their heads caved in, whacked in. It ticks the zombie box so much. Like, I can't even emphasize how much it so gets that point right. And that's what you want from a zombie film, in my opinion. And it's, as I said, it's very fast paced. There's some crazy characters. God knows where these characters were conjured up from. The lines are insane. The English dub's slightly different to the original Italian script, but that adds to the weird otherworldliness of it. Obviously, Peter Bark, who plays the young 10-year-old kid, so you've got a 25-year-old dwarf playing a 10-year-old child. He is so creepy. He looks like a 25-year-old, just shrunken down, shriveled down. It's fucked up. The stuff that they have him do with his mother, holy hell, it's insane. It doesn't hold back in any regard. So if you want a balls-to-the-wall, crazy zombie film with just straight-up action, straight-up zombie goodness all the way through, it's a beautiful location filmed in. It's a treat for the eyes. What have I not talked about? The score. So the score is quite interesting because it's fairly unique for the time in that it's very kind of minimal and low-key. It's by Elzio Mancuso, and I think it was also added to by Berto Pisano. And it's as I say, it's a minimalist electronic soundtrack. It sounds quite space age. You'd expect some part of the narrative to suggest that these have been the zombies brought back by, radiation from a space probe, again, like Night of the Living Dead, but that's never mentioned. It just adds to a really strange feeling for the film, and it's good. It doesn't sound like any other zombie film. It doesn't sound like, Fabio Frizzi or Goblin or anything like that. But yeah, I would highly recommend this film. It's a niche film, of course. You know, we're not talking about a mainstream recommendation here. If you like zombie films and you've seen your fair share of zombie films, check this one out, because I honestly think it will rate right up there for all the reasons I've said. So please, if you haven't seen this, you know, seek it out. It's got some great Blu-ray versions are out now, so you can look at this in really great detail. 88 Films here in the UK have got a great Blu-ray of this. It's got a nice commentary track by it's hosted by Callum Waddell, so that's worth checking out as well. So I'll be back to talk about more crazy Italian zombie films and other things. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.